1C of the ALN conference. Thank you for being here. So before we get started, I'll just run through a bit of housekeeping. So I've already mentioned about microphones and cameras. There'll be an opportunity after each of our talks for you to ask your questions. If you could use the raise hand function in Teams to ask your questions, that would be great. And then we'll ask you to switch on your microphone and your camera to ask your question. There is a chat. We're not sure if everyone has access to the chat. If you click on the dots in your taskbar, there should be a show conversation option. And you can ask your questions there, but we'd prefer it if you put your hands up, and then if you can ask them on camera, that would be great. So you can also turn on live captions if you want to, using the options from your taskbar, from that menu with the 3 dots. And we ask all delegates to abide by the conference code of conduct, and that can be accessed via the delegate brochure. Okay, so I'll just stop sharing my slides. Excellent. So without further ado, first of all, we have Kathryn Conway and Blyth from Northumbria University, and their presentation on managing capacity, demand and expectations at Northumbria University Library. So I will hand over to Lee and Kathryn.
Thanks, Ben. That's great. No pressure on us. We're the first ones after Andrew's wonderful opening speech, so it's good to be here. Lee and I actually recorded our session because we were hoping to manage outside noise by doing that. Having said that, we apologise for some of the quality of the recording because hopefully everybody will be able to hear it. So we just wanted to say hello to prove that we are still here, that we are here. We're here and looking forward to answering some of your questions at the end of our presentation. So for those Eurovision fans, take it away, Lee.
Thank you, Kathryn. Just to get everyone know, as soon as I start sharing my screen, our voiceover should start. I'll turn my camera off, so I won't be there while the screen's happening, but hopefully everyone will be able to pick up the sound. And we do apologise if there are any issues with our voices as well.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for our session today. My name is Kathryn Conway, and I am Head of Library Learning and Research Services at Northumbria University. I'm joined by my colleague Lee Blyth, our Discovery and Access Librarian, and together we're absolutely delighted to meet you and to have an opportunity at this inaugural Academic Libraries North Conference to discuss an experience that has been shared by us all. When you're one of the few places open on campus, how do you meet the demands on your spaces, manage them safely, and continue to provide an excellent customer service? I know that many of us found ourselves in a situation where we had to keep our services open, but also put something very quickly in place to ensure that our on-campus spaces were accessible and safe for those students who weren't able to study from home for whatever reason. For us, it turned out to be really quite a profound learning experience. And we really wanted to tell you not only what we did, which was essentially introduce a booking system to enable us to manage capacity in our buildings, but we wanted to tell you how we did it, why we did it in the way that we did, and what it taught us about our own preconceptions and our relationship with our students and with our spaces. I joined Northumbria late last year and was immediately struck by the extent and quality of the spaces that were available to students, researchers, and postgrads across the 4 library sites on the Newcastle campus. There are some really stunning and beautiful, quiet, individual and immersive spaces, as well as collaborative group and social areas. And it was clear that there was a huge amount of insight, thought, care and collaboration had gone into creating spaces that are genuinely inspiring and loved by the staff and the students at the University Library. And here are just a few of the things that students have told us they love about working in their spaces. All of the spaces were open access and they were designed to be used flexibly. Only the study rooms were bookable, and successive university library student surveys confirmed that by and large we were getting this right. Student feedback indicated that there was a demand for more bookable rooms for individual and group use and for bookable IT-enabled group space. Our customer experience team had investigated PC booking software in the past, and primarily this had been around managing high-demand resources, availability of IT, and the ability to gather usage data. Given that we knew about our spaces, student preferences and behaviours, it was clear to us that when we closed the libraries on the 23rd of March, along with all the other libraries closing in the whole of the country, it would have a huge impact on our students. We suspended our borrowing rules and relaunched the click and collect service from the middle of July, which meant that we were able to maintain some access to some of our print collections for some of our students and staff. What we really wanted to do, though, was to find a way to reopen some of our library spaces for those students who we knew were struggling to access IT, who had found lockdown isolating, and who weren't able to find a suitable learning space at home. We knew that the numbers would be low, but the impact would be really high. So it was a real top priority for us. We worked really closely with our health and safety colleagues and were able to reopen spaces on the City Campus Library from the beginning of August. Spaces were set at a metre plus, which meant that we had a reduction in capacity in our building by almost half. Students were hugely grateful and we were really confident that we were providing a good service for them. Scroll forward a few weeks and we're in the preparations for the 2020 academic year. We hit the August bank holiday weekend and find ourselves, along with some other institutions, subject to a major cyber incident which caused us to lose services. Systems went down and we were forced to close the libraries again. Top of everything else, this major IT interruption has obviously had a massive impact on our ability to access systems and to make systems available to students, to make systems and services available to students. It was hugely stressful. It was very difficult and it diverted attention from our COVID response planning. In a positive light, it had a galvanising impact on us as staff. It focused our attention. It made us realise how resourceful we were, and it made us even more resourceful. It sharpened our resolve to support students, and it changed our priorities in terms of our planning for the new academic year. Necessarily, our focus turned to reintroducing services, restoring systems and reopening spaces, and we were able to reopen for the start of the new term, albeit with a number of temporary measures and workarounds in place. As one of the few places on campus that was actually open, we found the libraries became something of a magnet for those students who were already in the city, although they were being taught online, and for those who were struggling to access some of the university's resources and facilities and services as a result of the cyber incident. In terms of university messaging, staff were being required to work from home wherever possible in line with the government guidance. And the university was slow in introducing mandatory face coverings on campus. Those staff who were on campus became increasingly concerned not only about student behaviour, but about the numbers of students who were visiting the libraries, and it was obvious that we needed to do something quickly to manage this emerging situation. We were already using SpringShare LibCal software to manage study room and event bookings, and we had a lot of experience and knowledge of configuring and using that product in the live service with students. We were aware that SpringShare had launched the LibCal Seats module earlier too. At the same time as we were looking at options for managing student spaces, colleagues in the university were looking at staff spaces, and together we took the decision to purchase LibCal Seats, which we could do quickly on the back of existing SpringShare subscriptions, and trial seat bookings in the University Library Digital Commons, which is an IT space for students that had just under 100 socially distanced spaces. the plan was to evaluate whether we could scale up and roll out lived car seats further for staff and student spaces if necessary. Of course, we never managed to actually complete our evaluation, which was a real shame, and we did have reservations based on the trial that we held. But we got to January, we were back in lockdown, and we had to take the pragmatic decision to go with lived car seats, roll it out across all of our library spaces that were open. Of course, that was going to take some time, and we needed an immediate solution, so we implemented LiveCar to manage bookings to visit the library, which we did to give us time to roll out, to prepare the library spaces and to roll out LiveCar seats wholesale across all of the library spaces that were open. This slide just gives the timeline of our rollout of the seat bookings. And what I'd like to do now is just hand over to Lee, who will tell you how we approached implementing LiveCar seats in a really, really short time scale.
Thank you, Kathryn. My name is Lee Blyth. I'm going to talk a little bit around our implementation of the seat booking service, how we brought 3 teams together to put this in place. I'm going to focus a lot more on the project management side rather than the technical side. So our starting point was we actually had some experience of seat bookings. A few months prior, we had implemented seat bookings in a single building with 100 seats. And we implemented over the course of about a week. It was 2 teams involved with that, but it was a small number of people. One team working on the digital side, another team working on the physical side, so putting the signage in the buildings, etc. Because we had a short time scale to do that, what it actually meant is we could be very focused and other work could be paused at that point. When we came to implement seat bookings wider, with 1,000 spaces and 2 buildings and 2 campuses, and we had a 4-week, although it was a short time span, it means that other work had to be accounted for. We couldn't just stop doing other work, so we had to do this very much as business as usual. But what it did mean for the starting point is we had some experience and what needed to be done. What we didn't know at this point, because the change in complexity, is what order these things should be done in. So that understanding, that informed our choice to project management approach for this. So thinking about the 2 basic project management approaches, you've got a very traditional, very set out approach of clear tasks, clear order of tasks as well. And then you've got the more agile approach of, you might know what tasks exist, but you might not know when they should be done or who should be doing them. And some of the issues that you might come up against might not be known. We were very clear we needed to make a start quite quickly. And so for us, the choice of agile management was a clear choice for us. So apologies that there's quite a lot going on this slide. I'm not actually going to dwell on it too much. This is just kind of a visual representation of kind of where we started and where we're aiming to go to. You'll see across the 4 columns there, we've got the 3 teams. And then we've got covered marshals who came online as the service went live. They were the front of house desk marshals and stuff for people coming into the building. The starting point was number 1 in the top left, where we had some previous experience where the knowledge from the very start was shared across 2 teams, not necessarily across all the individuals we would like to have them from the starting point. And then we will go towards number 3 down the bottom left there, where we've got 2nd and 3rd line support and 1st line support shared across all 4 stakeholder teams within this project. And going via number 2, where we had to do some work in between. And the red lines separate each one. They're there to represent organisational barriers, which might be structurally in terms of reporting lines, how different people communicate and how teams communicate, and also representative of the short time scale that we had to go from 1 to 3, doing quite a lot of complex work in the middle. And so we had a very clear goal there to bring teams and people together into new ways of working to really support the student experience that we're trying to achieve here. And for me as well in that, there was a very clear need to share the leadership responsibilities across teams here as well. So as a project lead, it was impossible for me to kind of understand the dynamics and all the information that was needed to gather from each team and all the work that needed to be done. So the approach was very much we had to let leadership emerge from within what we were doing. So some brief points around shared leadership. I've chosen a definition that I think sits very well with the approach that we wanted to take. Many different definitions exist, but this approach from us was very much around letting leadership emerge and letting responsibility for the outcomes emerge as well. So working within a working group, we defined some clear areas of responsibility at the start because we wanted to encourage different thinking, different ownership. But my job as a leader, and Kathryn's job within that as well, was not to stop leading. It wasn't to share leading. It was to flatten the hierarchies within the group to make sure that we all felt comfortable and we all had a role to play, and we didn't feel it wasn't our place, or someone didn't feel that they couldn't contribute. Also encouraging critical thinking towards what we're trying to achieve. It's a real key thing in shared leadership that everyone's allowed to think critically and given the space to do so. So the role of the leader in that sense is to ask questions, to prompt for thinking, to prompt for that criticality. And where those solutions and leadership emerge, to let it happen, to foster it. And one of the ways we did that was between peer support between the teams. There's knowledge passed from one person, one team to another, to encourage that peer support of the learning and of the thinking. And then touching on how we brought people together. Very simply, in any project, no matter how agile, how much you share in leadership, everyone needs good structure, everyone needs good communication. So we met each Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. That was a clear choice to signal priority to what we're trying to achieve, given its place in the day and the week. And we also met again each Friday. So the Agile approach gives us the opportunity to review outputs, to sense check ourselves, at the point in time to have critical thinking at the start and at the end of the week, and at the start and the end of tasks. We use Trello for task management so that everyone can have involvement in the site. I'll come to that in a second. But we also had a separate team space for conversations, which allowed constant group communication. But we separated that from a lot of other activities as well, so it can be very focused too. And here's a snapshot of the Trello tool. Trello is basically an online platform that allows you to do Kanban style lists, and you can structure them in any way you want and then put together any theme that you want as well. So if we work from left to right along here, so the tasks, the task list on the left were very much those themes that I talked about, where we'd add a list of tasks that we knew were going to come up. Everyone who was involved in the project could add things to these tasks as well. We would have a current sprint, which is basically on a weekly basis, what are we working on, what's important, and as you'll see, we would assign people's names to these as well. And then one of the most important things within this type of project is to have a what's emerging, what's come up that doesn't necessarily fit in the planned work, but we need people to look at and think about. And also we made sure that there was a list of things where other input was required, and we do a similar thing where we would tag certain people as those came in as well, and anyone across the group was able to do that. And also we had a column that thankfully at this point in time was empty, which was where a decision was needed as well. So very clearly highlighting if there was a decision that needed to be made before work could progress, it was separated out. And what Trello gave us for this particular project is it gave us task management and something to communicate with all in one as well. So the meetings would focus on very much this Trello board. We'd talk about each card, but we prioritize as well. So for me, as leading the project, it gave me that tool for shared leadership and communication to come from. And I always like to say, when you put task management and communication in one place, what you get is collaboration. And you'll see on the far right there as well. It's really important for me in any jobs that I do to have that. Here's what we've completed, and see that rise as the work progresses as well. So this slide it shares some of the outputs that we saw from shared leadership happening, which is really pleasing to see. And I think the main one for me was what I nicknamed the factory. So this was, we had people in particular who had some very fantastic knowledge of physical library spaces, who took the lead on understanding how to put QR codes and signage around every single space. When you think about, how do you print out 1,000 QR codes and put them in the right place, and also make sure the right QR code is on the right seat. in a very small space of time. So we're talking about a 4-week time scale, but we didn't start with the QR codes. We had to put them all in place first, get them all printed out, and get them where they need to be. It was fantastic to see, which is why I nicknamed it the factory, because the precision and the skill that was used to do that was fantastic for me. And we also had some fantastic work around communication. So not just that, what we should say, but understanding the student support needs and how to get information between the frontline team and the second and third line work as well was really important, and really pleasing to see that kind of come through. And again, on the system configuration. So we started back to that kind of complex structural slide. We started with some information on the very left-hand side, so building confidence for that knowledge to move, not just in terms of knowing what buttons to press, but seeing the critical thinking emerge in others, and also to the point where at the end of it, we brought up online. We never actually made it live as a booking service, but we saw people bring online an entire new campus and location without any input from the people who had the knowledge at the start as well, and do all the critical thinking around that completely separate to the project team was a fantastic thing to see. And the main output was that we got there. So within the time frame, we had a live and working seat booking service on the screen. You see some of the artifacts from the factory there as well, and also blended with the digital service that we delivered as well. So what was key here is that the output was a link between the digital and the physical for our students, who the spaces were so important for. And it was really fantastic to see that come to fruition, but see it come to fruition in a way where knowledge was shared and experience and practice was shared across a group of people as well. And finally for me, a little bit around some of the lessons we learned in this particular project. So very much around clarity and providing clarity where possible. One of the areas we found that was we scheduled the training for kind of weeks 3 and 4 within the implementation. And what we found was we'd done a little bit of show and tell as we worked through the setup, and that worked really well. But I think what we realised was that we scheduled the training very early on, it would have provided more clarity in terms of what change was coming for people, what buttons would people need to press. So when the handover was happening and that kind of sharing was happening, there'd be a little bit more clarity there for some people. I think that's a lesson learned very clearly for us as well. And overall, just reaffirming that in any agile approach, not knowing what's next and not having all the answers is actually okay. What we found was within the group when we would meet, not everyone would be comfortable with not knowing what was next, and it felt like a strange environment for some people as well. So probably one thing we could have done is just reaffirm that, this is okay as we go through that. It's fine. We will get there. We've got a lot of confidence. So lessons learned for us in that front. I'll hand back to Kathryn now.
The experience and success of taking an agile approach was an unexpected bonus for me, and not something of a shift in our thinking about project management, particularly in terms of how we empower our experts. I think it was a bit of a COVID effect at play too, in that we were all used to having to work more quickly, but it did feel dynamic, levelling and genuinely collaborative. We're really keen to champion the approach, and we'll be looking to embed it wherever we can in the future. I think one of the other really interesting things we learned was about our relationship with our students and our spaces. At the beginning, we found it incredibly hard to have to remove group and social spaces and to impose what we felt were constraints on students. It went against all of our principles, and it did affect our decision making. We were really pleased and quite surprised that students seemed to adjust well to seat bookings. And again, I think there may be a COVID effect here, in that we all had to book everything that we were doing at the time, didn't we? What I'm most pleased about is that it's given us an opportunity to really think about our spaces, to re-engage with them, and to continue the dialogue that we've started with students about how they want to use their spaces and what's important to them and what they value about them. For months, there were far more students on campus than staff, and at times that felt really quite disconcerting and a little uncomfortable. It felt like the balance had shifted and that students were taking ownership of their own spaces. And however much we say that we want to do that, it still felt uncomfortable. I think what it has done is given us a renewed commitment to using our UX toolkit and to finding opportunities, making opportunities to work with students to develop the creation of spaces that are inspiring, flexible and practical. So, seat bookings, did it work? Oh, it did work. Sometimes it only just worked. We needed capacity in 2 locations on a number of occasions when there was more teaching on campus and during the assessment period in May, and when the central message about non-essential visits was starting to lose impact. We were able to make some changes quickly to our check-in and check-out processes, and we did cap the number of visits that students could book to browse the bookshelves. But essentially, we relied very heavily on the COVID marshal presence to physically manage occupancy levels in the areas. Would we do it again? We rather hope we don't have to, but we have taken the decision to retain a couple of spaces, one on each campus, that will be set out at a metre plus, and that we will keep LibCal seats for the bookings. We think it's important that we give students that choice, that option, but we also think that it will give us an opportunity to do some more investigation around the behaviours around seat bookings and the preferences, and that will allow us to go forward and look at other solutions if we want to. What we're really keen to do is to work with colleagues in Academic Libraries North, and particularly through the Learning Spaces group, now that we've hopefully got a little less pressure on us, to actually reflect on our experiences and to share those experiences and to really think about how we can use what we've learned to improve our services. Thanks very much for listening to our experience. We'd love to hear about your experiences, and we do have a little bit of time for questions. So if anybody would like to post any comments or questions in the chat box, or you'd like to turn your camera on and unmute, we'd love to see you.
Oh, thank you both. That was really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, as Kathryn said at the end there, I think we've got time for maybe one question. I'm sorry, we started a few minutes late, so we're a bit pushed for time. So if anyone does have a question, oh, I can see a hand up. Sorry, I'm just trying to see whose hand went up there. Sorry, I don't know your name.
It might be me. Can you hear me? I'm Jane.
It is.
Jane Burgess at Liverpool Herb, and I'm so sorry because I got, despite a sign on my door saying please don't interrupt, I did get interrupted. So forgive me if I'm about to ask a question that you've already covered. But are you planning to keep your study space booking system in place as things get back to normal?
Shall I answer that? Partly. I should say. We are planning to, the university has made a decision to lift social distancing requirements, and we are resetting our library spaces to what they were pre-COVID. But we have decided to retain a couple of spaces on each campus where we are going to keep it at a socially distanced, well, a metre plus. And we will make those bookable, because we think it's really important for students that they have that space if they want it or they need it or they're not ready to go back into busy spaces. But I think it does some, so that's what we're going to do. You probably have picked up from our presentation that we had quite a lot of we weren't completely convinced with LibCal seats that it would work in our context. I'm sure it works in other contexts, but from our sort of situation, we were sort of quite concerned about how it would scale up with larger numbers and what else we would need to put in place to actually make it work. So if we did go we're interested in looking at whether students want bookings and what they want them for, and when they want them. But I think we would be looking at a range of different products, and that's where it would be really good to tap into the experience of colleagues in Academic Libraries North to really sort of have a really good chat about that. I don't know, what are you planning to do at Hope, at Liverpool?
Something similar with you, but yeah, more specialised bookable seats, so by postgraduates, but by specific sets of students, because it has gone down really, really well. And it's interesting, you said something that not really crossed my mind, that to keep them some bookable spaces as well for those that are still not sure about, because we're still not out of the woods yet, are we? So I think, yeah, I'd be interested in kind of being part of a wider discussion, because it's not going to get back to normal for a fair time yet, is it? I wouldn't have thought, although we're being pushed to. Well, I think as a you know, profession, I think we're still being fairly cautious, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'd be really pleased to check in with you and others as well.
Well, yeah, thanks for covering it today as well. It's been really useful to know that we're still not, you know, we're all still in the same boat and we're struggling with the same things. It's going to be a tricky term again, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
Good luck, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. And yeah, hopefully opportunities to carry on some of these conversations with Academic Libraries North colleagues in future as well. So if it's okay, if we can move on now to Sharron Woolley from Teesside University. So Sharron's going to be talking about how it started, how it's going, 10 years of the Succeed at Tees workshops and the pivot to online.
Thanks, Ben. Just check that you can hear me again.
We can hear you, yeah, I can see you as well.
And I'll just find my PowerPoint. So hopefully you can see the slides of my PowerPoint. I'm now thinking I wish I'd have recorded it like Lee and Kathryn did, because I was going to do this presentation from home, but then this morning the Wi-Fi dropped out, so I've had to come to work and I've got set up at work on a double screen, whereas I'd practiced it at home. So please forgive me if anything goes wrong. As Ben said, my name's Sharron Woolley and I'm an academic librarian at Teesside University. For those who don't know, that's a post-92 university based in Middlesbrough. We have about 18,500 students across 5 schools. And I'm one of 6 academic librarians who are part of the liaison and skills development team in student and library services. And within that team, we also have assistant academic librarians and retention support officers. So this is a visual representation of the title of my presentation, because if you are familiar with social media, this how it started, how it's going is something that is sometimes put on there with photos. So this presentation is going to look at how, after many years of face-to-face workshops, which we've got represented there on the left, we had to move the programme that we run called Succeed at Tees. We had to go online, which of course everybody knows about with the pandemic. So that is the image on the right. And hopefully I will showcase the agile way that we've pivoted and adapted our practice whilst acknowledging the challenges that this has presented. I'm hopefully going to also do a short live quiz, but we might have to see how that goes later on. So a brief history then. Before 2011, the team of academic librarians would deliver ad hoc information literacy support in modules if asked to do so by the school. And then in 2011, we got a new assistant director who had the vision that she wanted to enhance the student experience and also raise the profile of library and information services. So she carried out a review, getting lots of views of academic staff and others in the university on what skills that they thought students should need. And the result of that was the decision to try a generic workshop programme that covered information literacy and academic skills. This felt like a huge change in the way that we'd worked, and there was quite a lot of apprehension amongst our team about how we were going to achieve this. So we started with something we were familiar with, which was referencing workshops. So we ran 10 over a week in February of 2011. And we had 142 students across those workshops who gave us really good feedback. So emboldened by that success, or relative, we then developed a series of 13 workshops to run in the autumn term of 2011. They were mainly information literacy, but we did have a couple of academic skills ones as well. So after each workshop, we collect feedback from students, and then we also run an annual review meeting every year where we look at the workshops that we've run and decide which ones that we want to do in the following year. So we developed from that original 13, and at one point we were running 31 titles in 1 year, which was actually too many. So now we've gone back to having about 11 core titles that we deliver every year. One of the responses to the student feedback was they asked for the workshop materials to be online, but they've never asked for the workshops to be run online. So what we did was we created a LibGuide for each workshop, which has the workshop materials plus lots of other supplementary information about the particular subject area. Seem not to have moved on the slide there. Don't seem to be able to move the slides on. Bear with me. Oh, there we go. Right, so what happens when you're using two screens and you're not used to it? Sorry about that. Right, so this graph just shows, I thought it would be interesting to see how many people we got in that original set of workshops that we ran in 2011. So you can see the titles that we went with in that year. The eagle-eyed amongst you might think, hang on a minute, there's not 13 titles there, which is what you said. There's actually 14 titles. And that's because we dropped Database of the Month really early on and decided to go with Preparing for Your Dissertation. And as you can see, the critical thinking workshop was by far the most popular, which really surprised us actually. And also, where there's an asterisk next to titles, that's just where we've changed the titles from those original ones that we ran. So, after running face-to-face workshops for 9 years, quite successfully, of course, we all know that the pandemic hit in March of 2020. This meant that we had to cancel workshops that we were going to run, but actually we only ended up cancelling 3 workshops because we found that actually running workshops after Easter isn't very popular with students, so we'd actually stop doing that anyway. So we were asked to run sessions to support students in this new online environment, especially as many had deferred assignments to do. So we chose 6 titles to run with: dissertation support, group work, how to use references, reflective writing, report writing, and writing a literature review. We also found that many practical assignments that students would have been doing had been changed to a writing assignment, so these were really well attended, and we had a total of 258 students come to those workshops that we ran in April and May. And like when we first started the Succeed at Tees programme 9 years earlier, it felt like a huge change. And most of these challenges came from the fact that staff didn't have the tech to deliver the workshops online. Some had only gone home with iPads, and some had bad Wi-Fi, which is actually why I had to not work at home today. None of us had used Blackboard Collaborate or Microsoft Teams, so that was a steep learning curve for us, and we did practice sessions so that we knew what we were doing. Our workshops have become known for their interactivity, and we always get good feedback about this, but it was difficult in the short time frame, we only had about a month, to work out how to replicate the face-to-face activities that we did in an online environment. So we ended up with doing less activities and mainly used the chat function to engage with students. We also decided to have 2 members of staff working on each workshop. One would deliver it and one would moderate the chat. And we found that that worked really well. So we then had the summer of 2020 to prepare online workshops to run from the autumn term of 2020, because we'd been told that we would be still delivering online workshops whilst working from home, regardless of whether students were back on campus. So it meant that we had the summer, and staff were also given laptops during that time, so that made it easier for them to prepare the workshops. We still used Collaborate or Teams, but we could now look in more detail at the exercises that we used to do in the face-to-face workshop to see how we could make them interactive in an online environment. So the example on the slide is from the report writing face-to-face workshop. And students would sit around a table in about groups of 6, and each table would be given a set of questions about the different sections of a report, and then they had to match up the answers that were also given to them. So the report writing example from the previous slide was turned into a Zeetings quiz, where they had to choose which was the correct description of the section that was put. And that's the image on the left there. We also used Padlet, which allows students to anonymously give their opinions about things. So the example on the right comes from the Writing a Research Proposal workshop, where students are asked for the strengths and weaknesses of some research proposal titles. Other face-to-face activities that we had to change included where we ask at the beginning of the workshop what concerns students have and ask them to discuss that in the group that they're sitting at their table with, and then we bring that back and write on a whiteboard the answers that they give us. So again, this became an individual exercise where we used Zeetings or Padlet or chat. We found that the whiteboard function in Collaborate or Teams wasn't really suitable because students overwrote each other's words and sometimes the text was really small. We also give out handouts quite a lot in the face-to-face workshops, so these had to just become text or links on the screen. We've used other software such as Kahoot and Socrative, but we found that using free versions, because we always use the free versions, has limitations. You may know Zeetings has now ceased, and Kahoot have reduced the number of participants that are allowed to take a quiz. I think it's down to 10 now. So we're always looking for new software to see whether it will help us try and make our workshops more interactive. And this was where I was going to do a quiz, because we found a new software called Quizzes, and some of you may have already used it, but it might be new to some other people. We'll have a go, see if it works. I'm going to post the URL in the chat.
Sharron, just to say, you've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Okay. It'll be quick because it might not work. So there's a link there in the chat, but I'm not sure how many people can see the chat or whether it's going to work or not. I just need to launch that as well. What can you see on the screen at the moment, Ben? Can you see the quiz or can you see my PowerPoint?
I can. You're showing your PowerPoint, but I can open
That's all right. That's
in another window.
That's what I want still. Thank you. So we like quizzes because it allows you to get straight in to the quiz that you set up without having to put a room name or a number sometimes, and you also get random names given to you. So I think there's some people in my quiz at the moment, so that's excellent. Thank you for those people who are doing it. So you can set time limits for the questions and have a leaderboard as well. So the question that I posed to start with was just an icebreaker question to see if people were paying attention, which said how many workshop titles were there when we started in 2011. So for those of you who aren't doing the quiz at the moment, the answer is 13. So the quiz is going on at the moment. And again, it's just another icebreaker that's going on, asking which of the titles have I made up. Because probably not everybody can see it, it's probably not very helpful at the moment. So I'll go back to my PowerPoint if I can find it. So that we can carry on, especially as time is running out. So going online actually gave us the opportunity to reach more people. So these are our average attendances across the 10 years that we've been running the Succeed at Tees workshops. And as you can see, in the last 2 years, we've rocketed with the number of people that have attended the workshops. So that shows us optimism for the future. And last year was the first time ever that we had more students attending in the second semester. And I think that was because everybody was back in lockdown again and doing all their work online. So there is an appetite for online workshops, definitely. So going forward then, what have we learned and what does the future bring? So as I said, online workshops allow us to support learning for a wider range of students and their different circumstances. We now have recordings of all the workshops that we run, so students can learn asynchronously as well and look at it offline if they don't have much network capabilities. The feedback that we got was hugely positive. The students liked the exercises that we gave them, however they were done, whether it was just answering in the chat or doing a quiz or whatever. They liked the fact that they could ask questions in the chat and these were always answered clearly by the moderator. And the moderator can also put extra links into the chat, and that came up a lot in the feedback, that students liked that extra material being added there. There were a couple of comments bemoaning the lack of face-to-face workshops, but they understood that we couldn't run them in the situation that we're in. The limitations of running online workshops, we always in the face-to-face took a register and collected feedback, as I've said, and we tried to do that through a Microsoft form online, but we found that not everybody filled the register in, so it's quite difficult to know how many students that you get sometimes. You have to remember to anonymise chat and collaborate, and if you do a recording in Teams, you need to edit it because otherwise student names show up along the bottom, and that means exporting that to a different software such as iMovie. I think it's easier for students to be anonymous in online workshops, so they don't participate in the activities. We do ask them to turn cameras and mics off to allow for better bandwidth, but sometimes it can feel like you're talking to yourself, especially if the students don't respond in the chat to any of the questions that you pose. So going forward this year, we're going to have a blended programme, hopefully, of online and face-to-face workshops so that we can cover everybody. And we're also going to start a new series of Succeed at Tees shorts, where they'll be half an hour and they will just run online, where we'll cover things like how to use the Discovery search engine, how to reference specific types of material. And then there are plans for expansion further in the future, not this academic year, but we'll be working on it, so that we will make academic skills just one part of a holistic open programme of workshops that cover all of student and library services, so that we can have things like well-being and mental health included as well. So very quickly then, this is just an infographic that was produced by my colleague Nicola King, just to show what we feel is our success with these workshops that we've run for 10 years. And it has my favourite piece of feedback there, which says, "I honestly cannot put into words the amount of help I got. The load on my shoulder has really and truly been lifted. Very, very helpful. I enjoyed it and thank you very much." So thank you for attending this session. That's everything from me, and there might be time for questions. I'll leave that up to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharron. Yeah, that's great feedback, isn't it? It's what you want to hear. So I think we've got time for maybe one question. If anyone wants to put the hand up. I can't remember if I mentioned at the start, this session is being recorded, including the questions as well. So hopefully no one minds about that. But yeah, if anyone has any questions for Sharron, then please do say. Oh, we've got a question from Elaine Andrew. Elaine, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, hi Sharon. I was just wondering whether alongside the generic skills workshops with this programme, do you still do anything embedded in modules as well, like the ad hoc sessions that you used to have?
Yeah, definitely we do. So these are sort of like an add-on, and we still do the subject-specific information literacy sessions in the modules as well. Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Okay, one more question from Liv Jonathan.
Hi, thanks for that. How do you promote your sessions? Sorry if I missed that, I had to duck out of the session, but how do you promote the sessions to the students and also to the academic staff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've developed quite a lot of promotion over the 10 years. So we have an events feed that the university has, which goes through the library website, but we can also have it so that it's on the main university website as well. We have the LibCal feature, so we have a timetable that's up on the library website through LibCal, which has all the workshops on. It's on Twitter and Facebook. We used to have a leaflet, but that became too onerous to do, so we don't have that anymore. We've just started a newsletter for academic staff, so they're always put into that, and we find that lots of academics now know about this programme, so they do advertise them to their students as well. So, and it's a lot of word of mouth. One of the questions in the feedback is, how do you find out about this session? And the biggest is from either academics or their friends. So it's sort of taken off word of mouth, which is really good as well. So thanks for that question.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liv. And I guess that leaves me just to thank all of our speakers. So Kathryn, Lee and Sharron, thank you very much. And so next, oh, you actually have a break next. You've got 15 minutes until 3:15. There's an opportunity for networking if you go to the Chat and Cake channel in Teams. And if I can also encourage you to have a look at the sponsor channels in Teams, have a look at their materials. There is a treasure hunt activity that has prizes attached. So yeah, you can find more information about that in the conference e-brochure, I think. So yeah, I think that's about it for our first session. So thank you everyone for attending, and I'll see you at the next session. Bye.